Okay, good morning, welcome, thank you all for coming. Our speaker needs no introduction, but I'll do a short one anyway. Rabbi Herman has many accolades. Primarily, he is probably one of the most outstanding and beloved educators in the Anglican Jewry. That is number one. Number two, he is was a chavrusa of Rabbi. That's one of his accolades. Number three, he, together with Rabbi Grunfeld, he runs Seed. And fourth, and perhaps primarily, he's a former head boy of Hasmonean. And it doesn't get better than that. So it really is an honor and a privilege and a delight to welcome Herman back. And thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Herman.
Although whenever I come here, I always feel there's some maths homework I should have brought with me. Unfinished maths homework. Okay, so we've got an hour. And first of all, show of hands, because we can slant this in different ways. So I'd like to ask you two questions. How many of you heard any of my Seder night material before, either live or through video? Show of hands, please. Okay, so not that many, okay. And how many of you will have at your Seder night table primary school children as well? Okay, so most of you. So I'm going to mix a bit of old and new, because some of you, and there are some lovely ideas from the past, which I think are worth revisiting for those who haven't learned it before. But first let's start off, because this was billed as Pesach parenting and Seder night tips. So let's start off with a few important parenting ideas, because what happens is, we anticipate Yom Tov, we're very excited for it, and everybody's thrilled at the prospect of sitting together around the Seder night table, and it doesn't always go to plan. Correct? There's squabbles around the table, the kids don't always cooperate the way they want to. At this point you're supposed to be nodding to reassure me it's not just in our house. And instead of inspiration, it can be quite frustrating. It can be quite frustrating, and then if you're lucky enough to have time off for Chol HaMoed, there's the agonising question of where to go, and you've got different age groups. So sometimes, despite all the great excitement about Yom Tov, it can be, at best, an anticlimax. At worst, there's that moment when you put all the plates away, you get back to your office, you work, and God forbid you think to yourself, oh, Baruch Hashem, we got through another one. So I want to give you a few important parenting tips which can be vital. I'm not going to spend very long on them, about 15-20 minutes, and the rest of the time we're going to spend on Seder night ideas. First of all, have realistic expectations. Great phrase which I'm fond of, frustration is the gap between reality and expectation. Have realistic expectations of your children and of the situation. In other words, in terms of the length of your Seder, or the style of material, or the type of guests, adjust your expectations sensibly. Even if you want to run a long Seder, if it's not suited, I believe very strongly that people have got to go away feeling that was wonderful, that was beautiful, you know, and I wouldn't have minded it a little bit longer. That's what I feel, because man, I say, in our day and age, we're going to try and achieve. So you've got to tailor-make your material to those around your table. What's realistic, especially with teenagers who may not necessarily always be that engaged. We've got to find ways of engaging them wherever we can and having realistic expectations. Another example, a simple point, feed them well on Erev Yom Tov. Feed them well on Erev Yom Tov. Hungry children are grumpy children, like adults. So I'm not pascaling for you, but those who eat gebroks can have boiled and fried food and matzah meal. Otherwise you can eat meat and fish and eggs and fruit all day on Erev Yom Tov, really from Shah Siris, which this year I worked out around about 4:30. You're not supposed to overfill yourself so that you leave appetite for the meal, but it's important there's a good lunch on Erev Pesach. We always have a very good lunch on Erev Pesach and some food around in the afternoon, so that nobody goes into Seder night already famished. It's an important point. Number two, anticipate flashpoints with them ahead of time. So for example, flashpoints can be who is sitting next to whom. Who wants to sit next to their guest, who does not want to sit next to their guest under any circumstances whatsoever. Or it can be when there's younger children, afikomen can be a flashpoint. So in terms of parenting, flashpoints are much better dealt with ahead of time before they become contentious. A child can only hear when they're in a place to listen. When a child's not in a place to listen, it's hopeless trying to get them to listen. So have a discussion with your children a few days before Pesach. Take them out for a drink, take them out for a hot chocolate or something, and discuss with them. Well, let's see if we can work out the seating plan ahead of time. I know that you're not keen on sitting next to so-and-so, would you compromise this, that, and the other? Children are often very receptive when they are approached at the right time. So think a little bit ahead of time, what are going to be our flashpoints, and how can I anticipate them and forestall them before they actually happen. It's very important and can save. Getting to Seder night, you've got guests around the table, and this one wants this Haggadah, or this course, or doesn't want to sit here, or does want to sit here, and before you know it, everybody's on edge before the whole thing started. Number 3, which is always important, pick your battles. It'd be lovely if all children helped magnificently before Pesach, and during Seder night, and throughout Yom Tov. But it may not happen, especially with the teenagers, the adolescents. It may not happen. Now, I'm not saying that you capitulate on everything. What I'm saying is, pick your battles carefully. Which ones are going to be successful, which ones are not, and let go of those that you're not going to win. Let go of those you're not going to win. If you remember the course I gave 3 years ago, how long it was, remember the relationship is paramount. The relationship is paramount. We want them to leave Yom Tov with nice memories, with a good feeling, with a sense that, you know, one day, Mir Hashem, I want to replicate this in my house. So pick your battles. If they are not going to help, and nothing's going to force them to help, there's no point trying to force them to help. If they're not going to get up for shul the next morning, no point dragging them out of their beds in their pyjamas to shul the next morning. Pick your battles carefully, so that you win more often than you lose, and above all, you don't win the battle and lose the war, and Yom Tov becomes a whole difficulty in terms of relationships. So it's very important. I'm happy to take questions afterwards, but these are some general parenting points which I think can be Yom Tov changing in terms of how you use them. As I said, remember the relationship is paramount. Spend time with your children over Yom Tov. It's so important. If you're blessed enough to have Chol Hamoed off, then plan it carefully. Plan the outings ahead of time. Spend time. If you've got a range of children, Chol Hamoed outings are very, very difficult. I found them very, very difficult, because it's very difficult to get consensus as to where you should go, and no one wants to go where I want to go, which is a lovely countryside walk. But one thing that you can do is have, this year you've got 4 days Chol Hamoed. So maybe you can spend an hour or even 45 minutes with each child by themselves over Yom Tov, over Chol Hamoed. Give them exclusive time. That can be beautiful to do, on their terms, not on yours. So if I give a child an hour, I'll say to the child, what would you like to do? Not, would you like to go over your Chumash now? Which is on my terms, not theirs. What would you like to do? I don't mind play a game, go for a walk in Chol Hamoed, go out somewhere. What would you like to do? Let's use Yom Tov to build the relationship with our child such that it becomes productive. Now, let's talk about a fifth parenting point, which is, when it comes to Seder night, especially with the teenagers around the table, it can be difficult to engage them. They may not want to be engaged. They may just want to sit in their place. So don't force their engagement. On the other hand, sometimes, and I find quite often, they will want to be engaged if you engage with the right material, which we will come to. But sometimes you say to I've said this to teenagers and adults ahead of time, especially if you've got a big table, I'd like you to prepare to say something on this paragraph. People have often said to me, it won't work, and come back to me and say it was really, really good. Especially if you've got from and not from around your table, you can prepare anything these days. You can Google anything these days. So I will send I'll call up a guest ahead of time and say, will you prepare a short thought on Dayenu, on Avodah Mahinu, on Mitpillah? Here's the page. I'm very fond of using the family Haggadah, and I like everybody to use the same Haggadah. They don't have to, but it makes it life much, much, much easier. Everyone likes the old Haggadah, which they spilt wine on for 20 years. But if you can encourage them to use the same Haggadah, it makes it much easier. So I will ask people ahead of time, prepare something on this paragraph. Again, you may well have teenagers around the table, and you sit down with them, not on Erev Pesach, a few days beforehand. Would you like to prepare something on this paragraph? Or you will share with them one of the discussion points I'm going to give you, and ask them to prepare a reaction to that discussion point. Engagement has two advantages. Number one, it makes them feel included. Number two, they're more receptive to other people when they know that other people have to listen to them. That's true for children and for adults. I've seen this work extremely well. Now, again, often when you've got younger children, they come home with these notebooks full of material, and the whole of Seder night's been reversed. Instead of being gathered to the mincha by Yom teach your parents teach a child, it becomes the child doing all the talking. So I have explained to the children over the years that actually it's my mitzvah. I want to hear the Torah, that's very nice, but it's my mitzvah. And we bargain, and they each have They can each say one Dvar Torah or two Divrei Torah, depending on how many guests we've got around the table, on each night. So we share it out, so that most of the engagement is led by me, and some of the interaction is led by them. It's very important. Otherwise what happens is they end up asking parents lots of questions that the parents don't know the answer to, and the whole thing is reversed. And I say to them, there's plenty of time during the meal, or plenty of time during the other meals, you say your other Divrei Torah, and I'll sit down with them and look through the Pesach book, etc. But so that also needs planning ahead of time. A couple more parenting points before we move on to the Haggadah material. Yeah, interesting, as many of you will know, there's a mitzvah in halacha brought in Hilchos Yom Tov to buy gifts for your wife and for children. To make it Simchas Yom Tov for them. And it's brought in halacha. As far as I recall, we don't pass Kiddush D'Oraisa, but there are some who do pass Kiddush D'Oraisa. I was certain to have a Rosh Kodel who was very particular on this. And he used to go around the Kodel, even before Sukkot, and not ask us if we bought a good esrog, but ask us, have you bought your wife a gift? You may not like to know, but it says in halacha that you should buy either clothes or jewellery according to your financial ability. So, but it's an important halacha. It's an important halacha which I've been very mapping on over the years. As my girls have got older, and it's harder for me to choose for them something appropriate, so I'll give them something to spend and buy for Yom Tov. But again, ahead of time, I'll find something for my son, or I'll buy a game for all of them. Buy something ahead of time for Yom Tov. Again, another way of engaging them. Now here's something which may be a bit controversial, and everybody has to take this their own way. But in terms of shiurim for matzah, so again, sometimes you find the teenagers will really find it difficult to get through the shiurim of matzah. So I would say, if you have that situation around the table, talk to your Rabbi ahead of time and work out what are the shiurim that you have to give. Especially the second night, which is a Rabbanon, I'm not passing it to anybody, but work out what are the shiurim you have to give and do some calculations before Pesach. Because you're not allowed to impose your chumras on them. So I like to give my children enough but not more. Enough to be yotzim 100%, but not more, because they find it difficult to eat so much. And therefore, it becomes something that is not an enjoyable part of Pesach. On the contrary, it becomes difficult for them. So do your homework, and whatever matzahs we buy, I do my calculations beforehand, and work out in terms of the shapes of the matzahs, and the weight of the matzahs, what is critical. Now this may be too late, because you've probably invited lots of guests already, but actually thinking about your children when inviting guests. Is the company suitable for them, or will it all be adult conversation that they can't engage with? Is there company for them ahead of time? Have realistic expectations. If you've got, during the Yom Tov meals, company which is more for you than for them, then obviously let them leave the table at times and come back at other times. Have realistic expectations. Don't expect your children to do things that are actually beyond them. And finally, Seder night requires preparation. Just like the food wouldn't happen by itself, a good Seder night requires preparation. And it requires, I hope today to give you the advantage of some preparation I've done. And on the Seed website, there are 2 other shiurim that I've given in the past. I hope I'm giving you new material, but there'll be a little bit of overlap. Seder night, a good Seder night requires preparation. I would say it takes me several hours. I started 2 weeks ago looking for nice ideas to share with the children for Seder night. It requires preparation for successful Seder night. Okay, let's move on to some Seder night ideas. Seder night has always been interactive, and we have to adjust for our generation. The goal of Seder night the goal of these ideas is to enhance your Seder, not to replace it. Maybe different views on this. My view is the Seder night is not a Purim Seder. And there's a certain dignity in Seder night, a majesty in Seder night, which I certainly remember from my youth, and therefore we're going to try and enhance that. So I am going to suggest some interactive ideas and some use of props, but I think if it's done well, it doesn't become a Purim Seder, it's a Seder night which is very, very engaging. A couple of years ago, the JFT, Jewish Futures Trust, brought out a beautiful pack of cards. Some of you may have seen it, I'm sure you can get hold of it, which had some very lovely interactive ideas for Seder night, and that's something to look out for. Interesting question which we came across a couple of years ago. My father always used to sit at the head of the table. That's very sad. My father-in-law as well rang a kettle regally at the head of the table. But if you've got 20 plus guests, there's no way that you can engage those who don't own the table. So I broke with tradition, and I now sit in the middle of the table, right on the side of the table, so that basically I'm in the middle and I can engage with everybody around the table. Okay, so I'm going to give you a kind of formula for what I think is, it's only a guideline, so you'll adjust it, what makes a good Seder night. and then I'm going to give you the material for that formula. So the main thing we're looking for is interaction. Interaction at all ages. Rather than a monologue, which is what I'm giving now, and divrei Torah that you are monologuing, whatever the verb is, we're looking for points where they can interact. Short, sharp, quick points where they can interact. So I'm going to stress that a good Seder night needs at least one, especially if you've got younger children, interactive activity, possibly two. It needs a couple of really good stories, and it needs probably about 4 or 5 good interactive points with, divrei Torah to follow. So it needs 1 or 2 interactive moments, activities. It needs a couple of very good stories, and it needs, as I say, probably 4 or 5 discussion points where people can engage, and you've thought about it ahead of time. So I'm hoping to give you today at least 6 or 8 discussion points. If we get through it, at least 4 good stories, and some activities. Let's start off with some activities. Apologies to those who have seen it before, but most of you haven't, it seems, which is a very interesting way to start off the Seder night, which is the maths. This is an interactive activity. How many Seder night tables is it between us and Yetzias Mitzrayim? So Yetzias Mitzrayim was roughly 3,300 years ago. What?
331.
Okay, well that's too complicated for me. 3,300 years ago, we'll go for that if you don't mind. That's my last offer. So how many Seder night tables was that? How many generations? Let's say a generation is 25 years, more or less, give or take. 3,300 divided by 25 is 132. Math's actually quite easy. Divided by 100 and then by 50 by 25 is 132. So let's say if the generation gap is 25 years, there's only 132 tables between me and Yetzias Mitzrayim. But now go around your table and work out what the generation gap is. Who's the youngest, who's the oldest? Little child of 7, granny's 85. So there's a much bigger gap. In which case, there are many less Seder night tables connecting us to Mitzrayim. Let's say the generation gap around the Seder night table is not 132, but half of that, 66. Only 66 tables between us and Yetzias Mitzrayim. Which doesn't seem that long. Okay, it's a pretty big hustler. 66 tables is what it takes between us and Yetzias Mitzrayim. So that's a very nice interactive idea. And many years ago, on Pesach, I had the idea of trying to make it a little more graphic. So I made, basically, a version of this. How many of those have seen this before? Okay, a number of you have. Basically, I made these dolls, which have 132 dolls. And I took it out, and the first one over here is my great-great-grandfather who came out in Mitzrayim. And we passed this round the table. All the way around the table. And the last 4 pictures over here are pictures of my children. Went all around the table. Beautiful idea. Now, as they have got older, what I have done is develop the idea. And worked out more or less who's holding which stage of Jewish history. So I say, right, count 15 in. You're holding the period of David HaMelech. You're holding the period of Shlomo HaMelech. Where you're holding is a period of Churban Sheni. Where you're holding is Churban Sheni. I might elaborate on a character. You're holding where Hillel and Shammai lived. So they can literally see the chain all the way through. Beautiful idea. Very powerful way of starting on the Seder. And that's what Seder night is all about. Pass it down from generation to generation, and you are the next link in this vital chain. So you can buy these packs, I think from Hobbycraft. They come in packs of 6, basically, but you have to stick them together. So it takes a bit of time. One trick is sticking them together. You've got to stick them not overlapping, otherwise you can't bend them. Right? So just you stick them together, the packs together. It's worth doing. My wife has made a lovely box that goes with it, which one of the letters fallen off. It used to say Midar Ladar, from generation to generation. So that's one idea which some of you would have heard before. I'm going to show one more that you've heard before, those who've heard me before, but it's a very important one. And this is a great story which you can elaborate on. When I give the story today, I'm going to give the kernel of the story. You can build the story. You can build a story. The story is told of children who come to visit grandparents or great uncles and aunts, and they come to visit every so often, and in the middle of the table there is always a box. And they say to their grandfather, let's say, "Grandpa, what's in the box?" And Grandpa takes off his glasses, rubs his eyes and says, "In the box is the future, is a secret of the future of our family." And it is very, very strange. What does that mean, Grandpa? And Grandpa says, "We think you know what it means. Write on a piece of paper, give it to me, and I'll give you a prize." So one day, so when I tell the story, I pick names and I think ages of children around the table. Sarah was 7, oh you're 7. And Shlomi was 5, oh that's so funny, you're also 5. Tell the story. One day Shlomi comes in, thinks he knows what's in the box, writes on a piece of paper, Grandpa looks at this paper, sorry, in the box is the future of our family. This becomes the mantra of the story. Sarah comes in one day, and the box is the future of our family. One day they come in, and the box is surrounded by chocolates. And they say to Grandpa, what's happening today? And Grandpa says, you remember this box, the secret of the future of our family? Today I'm going to open the box. I would pause at this point in the story, and ask the children how do they feel. Nervous, anxious, worried, etc. And then I would ask them, what do you think is in the box? And I would then produce from under the table a box, the light blue Peter, here's one I prepared earlier, showing my age. And then I would ask them what's inside the box. For those who have not heard the story before, any suggestions as to what's inside the box? The secret of the future of our family. Anybody?
Torah.
What?
Torah.
Torah. That's, on this point, not what I'm looking for.
Your children.
Your children. How do you get your children in the box? Pictures of them. So I think I've gone one better, because inside the box is a mirror. A mirror so the children can see themselves. First time you do this, it's quite a powerful story. You are the future of our family. Tonight, Chol Davadar, Chayav Adam Nereses Hatame. You mechuyev to see yourself. Okay, I'm going to move on to ideas that are new, or this one's quasi-new, I haven't shown for a number of years. This is very, very good for teenagers. And it leads us to quite a deep idea which we shall develop. Our first discussion idea. This is a piece of paper which has on it various different logos. Swastika, Mercedes, London Underground. And pass it around the table, make copies. Then we can upload onto the Hasbro website afterwards. And ask everybody around the table in pairs to identify the logos and what emotions they conjure up. What emotions they conjure up. And then there's one particular logo on here which is a fake logo, it's not a real logo. So no one will really be able to know what it means. And then we have a discussion, that's interesting. So what is a logo? What is a logo? We live in such a symbol-driven world, we think logos themselves have meaning. Logos don't have meaning. Logos are a link between us and another piece of education. So let's take a bizarre example. You took a swastika and you gave it to a 3-year-old to colour in. They have no understanding what it meant at all. I don't recommend you put it in your window. But they have known, because we've been educated to know what it means. So it's fascinating to think that a logo only triggers meaning if you understand the background to it. The logo is a switch that allows you then, that's what it means. So it's a good introduction to Seder night, because you then pick up the matzah and say, what does this symbolise? What does matzah symbolise? This is my first discussion point. This is an example of a discussion point where everyone can get involved. What does matzah symbolise? Some will say freedom, and some will say slavery. Because at the beginning of the Seder, matzah represents slavery, halach ma'anya. The end of the Seder, matzah represents freedom. So, again, especially if you've got more of an adult audience, you can ask a really good question. Why do we have the same symbol for freedom and slavery? Are we short of symbols for slavery? You can even ask them, if you had to choose a food that symbolized slavery, what would it be? Smoked salmon bagel, some sushi, plenty of foods could symbolize freedom. What would it be? So why did Hashem not give us a new symbol for freedom? It's a really good question. Now I could give a whole chair just on this topic, which I've heard deals with it at length, but there's a quite profound idea here, probably, which is as follows. If the symbol is the same, but it means something different, it must mean the context has changed, but we wanted to retain something from what it previously meant into what it means now. Must mean the context has changed. But Hashem wanted us to retain some aspect of the original meaning of matzah and take it with us into our period of freedom. Example, I have inherited at home a fountain pen that belonged to my father. It's probably about 100 years old, and as children, we were hardly ever allowed to use it. It was a massive treat. It's one of those that literally got a squirty thing, and which was a massive treat to use this fountain pen. And it was a big treat. Now when I use this fountain pen, as I do occasionally, it's the same symbol, but the whole context has changed. It's a bit poignant, it's a bit nostalgic, but it's still a connection with my father. So what is it that Hashem wanted to retain from slavery into freedom? So to really cut Rav Hirsch very short, it's as follows, a very fundamental idea. What does freedom mean on Seder night? Is it freedom to do whatever we want to do, or the opportunity to do what we have to do? In the world around us, freedom is often equated to freedom to do what you want to do. Laissez-faire, do what you want, just do it. But on Pesach, it's not freedom to do whatever you want to do, it's the opportunity to do what you have to do. So what we retained from matzah is that when we were slaves, we were responsible to another master. Hashem did not want us to lose that. We came out of Mitzrayim still holding the matzah with that sense of, now I'm also responsible to another master. Just this time the master is Hashem, will allow me to realize the purpose of my life. So the reason why matzah is the same symbol, because Hashem didn't want us to lose that thread of responsibility. If I remember correctly, he calls matzah the bread of responsibility. And that's why I often used to tease my wonderful mother and say one of the hidden miracles in the Haggadah is that we were enslaved for 210 years. Sorry, we were in Egypt for 210 years. We were enslaved for 80. Comes the night of Tis Mitzrayim, ready to go out. There's a knock on the door as the mums or dads are making sandwiches. Sorry, no time to make sandwiches, you've got to go. Not one parent turned around to Moshe Rabbeinu and said, listen, we've been here for 210 years. Another 15 minutes to make smoked salmon bagel isn't going to do any harm. Why did Hashem insist they had to come out holding matzah? Insist. Because you had to understand this wasn't freedom to do what you wanted to do. You were swapping one master for another. This master would give you an matzah, an matzah, everything with it. So it's quite a good discussion point, which is all led from the activity, and there's 2 points of discussion. What does matzah symbolize, and why is that same symbol used? I'm not going to give you a little bit of a longer discussion point, some shorter discussion. I'm sorry, one more game, which I thought of last year. I'm sorry, it's very primitive. Haven't yet had a chance to make it more sophisticated. This again occurred to me last year. I'm one of those people that my imagination tends to fire up as close as possible to the deadline. It's just the way it works. It sort of makes life a bit pressurized sometimes, but what can I do? So very shortly before Pesach last year, this game occurred to me. It has quite a deep game. It's called Chometz Pasta Parcel. And basically, we have over here cards which sound at Chometz, and I start singing. When the music stops, you unwrap. And remember that Chometz represents the inflated personality. The inflated personality. All of those midas that build us up artificially. So on the back of each piece of paper is a midah. This one is jealousy. And I ask the person who has it to talk a little bit about this midah and why it can be damaging. And then it goes all the way through. You've got anger, and you've got greed. It becomes a little more subtle because you've got arrogance. As we get a little bit deeper, you have to look a little bit harder for where the midah is. Especially made it smaller, because as we get deeper into ourselves, it takes more work to understand what is the midah. This is lack of emunah. The next one is lack of self-esteem. And the final one, final piece of the card, is matzah, which is the real you. The real you. So we actually did this last year around our own Seder night table. It was very successful, with all ages. That was quite fun. But it's a very deep point over here. On Pesach, we're supposed to get rid of all those midas rods and understand that within us there's a deeper person that is free from all those midas rods and that can engage with Hashem on Seder night. Okay. I'm going to go through short, quick discussion points in quite quick succession, hopefully in sequence in the Haggadah. And I'm going to give all page references up to this Haggadah, which is the family Haggadah, easy to get hold of. So the first one is a good discussion point about Aminu. This is an open-ended discussion point. We know that in Mitzrayim, Paro insisted that we did jobs that were counterintuitive. He gave us jobs that were hard for us to do. Didn't use our skill set naturally, wanted us to work against the grain. So first of all we could discuss, why did he do that? It was psychologically damaging. Because at least if you're a slave, you take a step back and you see you've done a day's work, there's some sense of satisfaction. He wanted us to work against the grain. And what is a good discussion, and it's good for all ages, everybody around the table would have to say, what do they hate doing? And if you were there, what would Paro give you to do? Say, in the smallest and youngest child, you'd say, I hate tidying up. And then, by the way, of course, in the Seder night, as leader of the Seder, you've got to dramatize it. you hate tidying up, do you know what would have happened? You would have come into the house of, let's say, Rabbi's, and he would have given you a whole pile of toys to tidy up, all in order with all details. And then, when you've done it, you would have come in and taken the box and turned it upside down and said, that's not good enough, do it again. You've done that day after day after day. And everybody around the table says something that they hate doing. They're not allowed to say something that somebody else is not good at. There's a slight risk there. Well, they're rubbish at this. Something they hate doing. But it's a quick discussion point what I mean. And what I'm giving you now is punctuated discussion points through Maggid. Okay? To my mind, Maggid takes about anywhere between, depending on the audience, the crowd, an hour to an hour and a half, something like that. I keep it fairly punchy. So the points that I make are fairly punchy. Next point, which is an interesting point, page 33. Vayareu osanu hamitzrim. The Egyptians did evil to us. It can also be translated, the Egyptians made us evil. So a good discussion point. How can you make somebody else evil? How can you make somebody else evil? Sometimes while they're in discussions, you can give people a couple of minutes to talk to the person sitting next to them and come up with a solution. So some very important points here which can be shared. First of all, for younger children, you can talk about how sometimes others can encourage you to do not nice things, can encourage you to bully, or use unpleasant words or unkind words. And who does that damage? Not just your victim, it damages yourself. So that's an important point. For older children, of course, the Egyptians made us tormentors of each other, like the Capos. They appointed Jews over Jews, so they made us evil. But the deepest point is, which I always like to bring out Seder night, is that they attacked us and abused us verbally, told us we were rubbish, told us we were worthless, told us we were vermin. They destroyed our own self-belief and made us think that we were worthless. We're going to come back to that in a minute with another discussion point, and we'll see that in the Haggadah. It's an important point to bring out, how damaging words can be, and how they used everything in their artillery to destroy us. Another point, and again I'm working through, so we've had a discussion point on matzah, on Havanas Takmaleh. I saw this for the first time just yesterday. Same page, page 32. Let us deal wisely with them. First of all, it's very interesting how anti-Semitism started at the time. It started at the top, it was orchestrated at the top. And what ploy did Pharaoh use to turn the Egyptians against the Jews? Remember, we'd lived there for 130 years before the slavery. And we were a big population, we were part of the place. So what ploy did Pharaoh use to turn Egyptians against us? So if this was my Seder night, I'd ask you to look at the Haggadah and look at the next few sentences. What?
It's for ourselves, we have to preserve ourselves, our land, our culture.
Right, good. Absolutely. The first way to create xenophobia is to suggest that they're not loyal. That's what the Haggadah says. Maybe if there was a war, who would they side with? Who would they side with? They're not loyal. I saw a Moshe Feinstein ask the question over here. I mean, the structure of this point in the Haggadah is that there are 4 key sentences, which are beautifully highlighted in this Haggadah, and then in each sentence, what we might call a hyperlink, where the Haggadah elaborates on the phrases of the sentences. The second sentence, and they did evil to us, doesn't actually talk about the action of evil yet. It starts off by talking about the plan of evil. So Moshe asks, why do we talk about the plan of evil before? Surely this sentence is really about the action. And he says, because premeditated evil is always worse. Fascinating point. Premeditated evil is always worse. The final solution, it was premeditated. Another discussion point. Okay, I think we're going to, if we have time, we'll come back to an interesting discussion point about B'yad Chazaka and Dever. But let's jump for the moment to the Makkahs, discussion points for the Makkahs. So, as you might have noticed, I have brought in a box, and I do use props, especially for the younger children, when it comes to the Makkahs. Over the years, here are the JFT cards, if you haven't seen it before. Over the years, what I've tried to do is collect props that are realistic. So when we talk about when we talk about having to build from straw, I'll pass it around the table. Imagine having to go out every day and collect straw to build from it. And when it comes to the matzahs, I'm not so keen on these kind of plastic party ones. I like ones that look more realistic. So over the years, I've collected a whole lot, and there's a certain expectation in the house that each year there'll be something new in the box, which there normally is. I can pre-prepare these in a cup. I won't do it now, but I will throw these across the table. They're pretty awful. They're like lice or vermin or that type of thing, but they're the realistic type you might find, unfortunately, in Israel. Joking. So I do use props, but I use them to create realistic effect and to elaborate on the story. Okay, so there's all different things here: locusts, etc., etc. I think this was the last year's finish. And on the matzahs, we'll spend about 10 minutes on the matzahs, possibly sometimes a little more, depending on how we're doing. But I will, really dramatize it for the younger children, and add midrashim for the older children. Which brings us to another point, which is a great discussion point, which goes together with this. To ask the children two questions. Which was the scariest matzah? Which is a good discussion point. And why? Or the most terrifying matzah, to use slightly more adult language. And this is important. Which matzah do you think we in Mitzrayim learnt most from, and we learnt most from? Now there's the famous Ramban at the end of Passion's Boy, beautiful Ramban, worthwhile going through before Seder night. The Ramban talks about what Maccas taught us. He says there were 3 different types of denial of God in those days. There were those who said the world had always existed, there was no beginning. There were those who said that God existed but didn't have knowledge of our world. And those who said that God existed, had knowledge of our world, but didn't take interest in individuals, hashgacha pratis, the minutiae. And the Ramban shows that the phraseology of the Maccas demonstrated that each of these ideologies was smashed to smithereens. It says the Makkah of Orov, wild animals, Ki ani Hashem bekerev haaretz. I am Hashem in the midst of them. So we'll talk about the eagles which swooped down, and not one eagle made its way into Goshen. Not one eagle made its way into Goshen. And the Mount Hashem haaretz in Borod, where everything with the hailstones, recreation. They saw creation in front of them. From the dust of the earth, they saw lice. That demonstrated that Hashem was there. Hashem could overturn creation. And then it says, Ki ein kamoni b'chol haaretz, the plague of Dever, showing Hashem's ability and knowledge of all that there was. 2 animals drinking from a trough, exactly the same trough. One animal drops dead from Dever, the other animal, belonging to Klal Yisrael, remains completely alive and healthy. So we use the makkahs and the props to bring out the fundamental of Seder night, which is a reinforcement of emunah, a reinforcement of bitachon. Okay, so I have given you 7 discussion points so far. I'm going to give you an 8th discussion point. And that is Pesach, matzah, and maror, towards the end of the Seder, or the end of Magid, Pesach, matzah, and maror, in this Haggadah. Page 42. And the question here is, why this sequence now? At the end of the Haggadah, Pesach, matzah, and maror, why this sequence now? Surely maror should come first, and then Pesach, and then matzah. Great question, right? Maror should come first. So, there's many different levels of answer to this question. One level of answer is that we were supposed to learn 2 things from coming out of Mitzrayim. But also to remember that we were slaves. We were supposed to learn empathy for others. Empathy for others. So when we come out of Mitzrayim, we're not supposed to forget the fact that we suffer. We're supposed to take that with us so that we can empathize with others who suffer. A slightly more profound concept might be that a person goes through suffering, even if they move beyond the suffering has changed them. Suffering has changed them. It will always affect part of their personalities. So, again, discussion points. What I'm going to do now is give you, I promised you some interaction, some discussion points, and you'll plan how you'll use them, split them, different Seder nights. Now I'm going to give you some stories. I would never normally do this in a shiur, which is to tell one story after the other, but because I've suggested this formula, that's what I'm going to do. This is a story which can be used Let's try and do this in sequence. A story that can be used in Yachats. To open up the Seder, a story of the Yachats. There is a beautiful idea, which I once saw referenced on Kabbalah, that the hiding away that matzah reminds us of when Yaakov confronted Esau, Yachatz is a machane, and he split the camp into two. And he said, even if Esau comes and attacks the outer camp, the inner camp will be protected. Now, so it's brought, I think it was from the Zohar, that represented the inner and outer Jew. The outer Jew has often been under attack, but the inner Jew, the spark of the inner Jew, is protected. Is always protected, is invincible. So there's a Haggadah written by Chief Rabbi Lau, Sir Meir now, former Chief Rabbi of Israel, in which he brings the following story which you could add to that thought. It says, he was sitting in the basement in Tel Aviv, and a doctor arrived who had come from Moscow the day before. And he wanted to affirm his Jewish status. And he brought with him two witnesses. And he literally arrived the day before. The doctor was 42 years old, and his name was George. And one of the witnesses he brought with was a Chabad Shliach that had spent many, many years in Moscow and knew this man's mother. This man's mother was still alive, an elderly lady, living in Moscow. And the Chabad Shliach said the following story. This man's mother was a chain smoker, several packets a day. This is still times of the Soviet Union, but every night before she went to bed, she put one cigarette away. Collected 365 cigarettes a year, or 300, however many it was, and before Pesach, she exchanged those cigarettes for flour to bake matzahs. She wasn't from otherwise. She had to have matzahs for Seder. So Rabbi Lau calls up this lady in Moscow and has a conversation with her in Yiddish over the phone. And yes, she confirms that's what she did, and talks about her genealogy, where she came from, etc., etc. And while she's still on the phone, Chief Rabbi Lau says to her, we keep matzah one night of the year. You kept matzah 365 nights of the year. He actually says, I don't know if you follow all the stringencies in making matzah, but I know your matzahs were holy. And he turns around to the applicant, processing the application while his mother's still on the phone, and says, welcome, Achi, my brother, to Israel. From now on, you're no longer going to be called George, you're going to be called Gershon. And the mother on the phone, you can hear the tears, she says, that was the name my late husband gave him 42 years ago at Qudus. Beautiful story. Yachatz. Hidden Yid, that spark that is absolutely indestructible. Love the story. In Harry Zem Shuvach, again in Avodim Ayinu, where we say, this is a story which it might be quite useful to tell teenagers around the table, as you will hear. This is a story which I saw in a booklet written by Benji Goldberg, who lives in Edgware, often produces beautiful Torah booklets, in one of his booklets. It's a fictitious story, but the essence of the story is as follows. I can do the kernel, again you can build it up. Post-war, there's a young man who's, I don't know, 10, 11 years old, maybe a little bit older, completely stranded, lost all of his family. And an uncle in America takes him in as though he is his own. And raises him, schools him, feeds him, clothes him, gives him everything. Treats him like his own children. Secondary school, yeshiva, college, whatever it is he goes through. Everything the uncle provides without any differentiation between him and his own sons. One day, comes to a shidduch, finds him a nice colour, a wedding, and he makes sure the wedding is nice. And in the wedding, he's dancing with his uncle in the middle. And he whispers to his uncle in his ear, Uncle, I can't thank you enough. And the uncle stops the dancing for a second and says to him, is that all you have to say to me? For the last 15 years of care? You should be, not for me, but for you. You should be getting hold of the microphone and shouting it from the rooftops. All I've done for you. For you. You should be getting hold of the microphone and shouting it from the rooftops. My uncle fed me, clothed me, etc. The more that one narrates the kindness of Hashem, this person then becomes praiseworthy. the narrator of the goodness becomes praiseworthy. It's a good story because you can possibly slip in a message that sometimes we take things for granted. All that's provided for us. We take it for granted and assume it's always going to be there, and we don't express our thanks in the way that it should be done. Therefore, the Haggadah reminds us to express our thanks. Story number 3. 1 second. Okay, story number 3. The man Tizkor, page 28, we're supposed to remember the Haggadah and Yetzias Mitzrayim, I should say, all of our lives. So, 1 minute. Okay, all of our lives. So I came across a mashal in one of the article Haggadahs. Why do we bring this in on Seder night? There's discussion about the mitzvah of Yetzias Mitzrayim all the days of our lives. So he gives a nice mashal. I've adapted it slightly. But basically the mashal is, when we take from our home, let's say my wife goes away for a few days by herself, which is rare. Happened once or twice, but it's rare. I'm afraid to say, confessions, if she went away by herself, I would need quite a list of things that normally happen that she wonderfully takes care of. This is the fridge, large and white, don't confuse it with the oven, that type of thing. And so, let's say, in our example, it could be either mother or father, but the mum goes away for a few days and leaves a whole list of instructions for the family. And says to the family, read these instructions every day. Read them every day. And that's what the family does. They sit around the supper table and they read the instructions every single day. They don't do anything with some of the instructions, but they read them every day. And the plates pile up, and the washing piles up, and the dustbin piles up. A few days later, mum comes home to find this incredible mess. And she says to them, what happened? Didn't you do what I said? And they said, sure we did. You told us to read the instructions every day. So she said, reading them is just stage 1. That's sterile. You have to read them and turn them into daily practice. So here, in the middle of the Haggadah, we're told, Haggadah is Seder night. It's your, as Symbolism Rabbi calls it, Rosh Hashanah Emunah. It's the launch for the year. But you've got to remember it every single day. You've got to take the Emunah of Seder night and translate it into every single day. Story number 4. And that is from the Haggadah of Rabbi. And that is, I add it into Nitzek al Hashem. Nitzek al Hashem, page 34, we cried out to Hashem. By the way, note over here, a beautiful idea just to bring out. When I say the Rebbe Torah of Haggadah, they're very short and sharp. Nitzek al Hashem, vayishma Hashem es koleinu. We called out to Hashem. Sorry, I didn't quite put that correctly. Nitzek Hashem, Elokei Avuseinu. We called out to Hashem, the God of our fathers, vayishma Hashem es koleinu. Beautiful point to bring out. We didn't believe that God would answer us in our own merits. So we tried to use a protexia. You knew my Zeder, my Alter Zeder, my great-grandfather. Vayishma Hashem es koleinu. Hashem heard our voice. Beautiful point. Sometimes we don't believe in our own koyach tefillah. We don't believe in our own power of prayer. But actually we should believe in our own power of prayer because it's something significant. So I'm going to actually give you 2 stories here. I think we've got time for 2 stories and some final thoughts. There was a wealthy man, this is a marshal, who wanted to get a bit more attention. So he stood on top of a high building, again you can elaborate, and he started to throw down £20 notes. The actual £50 note, halavai. And people on the floor were scrambling all over the place with £20 notes and £50 notes. But not one person looked up. Nobody looked up. Then when he started throwing down, was clods of earth and stones, hitting people on the head. And then people looked up saying, what are you doing? He said, if you'd looked up when I was showering you with bracha, I wouldn't have needed to grab your attention in a more negative way. What we're saying to him Number Dalet, Korov Hashem Nishbarei Leiv. Hashem is close to those who are broken-hearted. Vayishma Hashem Eskonenu. Hashem heard our voice. So, but obviously, we are supposed to turn to Hashem not just when He throws down the difficult stuff, but to what's the word, preempt that by remembering our brachas and turn to Hashem on a daily basis. I want to tell you one other story here, which is a great story about how tefillah works. Because there's a question about tefillah, which is an obvious question, which is nothing and what changes before and after prayer. Aren't we the same? What changes before and after prayer? Hashem knows what I wanted before I opened my Seder. Hashem knows what I wanted after I opened my Seder, after I closed my Seder. What changes? So I once heard from Rabbi Kupitz in Manchester the following mashal. He said there was a teenager, we'll call him Jimmy. And Jimmy was a real Herman, a real lad, right? A real live wire. He came to the age of 17, I don't know what age you're allowed to drive a moped, is it 17? I don't know. 17, and he wanted a moped. But his parents were not going to allow him to have a moped under any circumstances. They were worried for him, they were worried for others, no circumstances. And Jimmy does everything teenagers can do, stonewalls his parents, slams the doors, doesn't speak to them for days, etc., etc., but they are adamant. Anyway, Jimmy eventually realizes the campaign is futile, and he then moves on to yeshiva and college, and is working, and it's a few years down the line, and one day his father calls him up and says, you know, Jimmy, you're a long schlep to work. For your 21st birthday, Mum and I are going to put down or buy you or go halves with you a moped. I don't want to raise children's expectations, I'm buying you a moped. So the question is, what's happened during those years? Who has changed? Jimmy. The parents haven't changed. Jimmy has changed. Tefillah doesn't change God. Tefillah changes us. And God can choose to respond differently. Tefillah changes us, and Hashem can choose to respond differently. Again, a good story to utilize for Hashem Eskonenu. We've got just over 5 minutes left. I could add a couple more thoughts, or we could stop for some questions. Let's pause for a minute. Are there any questions? Questions? Anybody? Okay. So I'm going to add some final thoughts.
Yeah. Can you just do briefly mention the 3 types of matzahs again? Because that was a bit quick.
Okay, sure. So there were 3 types of kafirah, denial of God. Some said that God did not exist. Some said that God existed but had no knowledge. He was too distant. Some said he had knowledge, but he didn't take an interest in the individual destinies. So the different makkahs and different points. So the makkah of Orov, where it said wild animals, showed hashgacha process in a very dramatic way. The animals only went where they were supposed to go. Right? According to Medrash, the animals brought with them their own climate, etc. The makkah of Borod is one that shows Hashem's power over creation. These great big hailstones that came hurtling down from the sky. Other makkahs also showed that, but that's where it's highlighted. And the makkah of Dever showed the power of God. But, and the Ramban doesn't tie one to showing the knowledge of God, but they all show the knowledge of God because of differentiation that was made between the Klal Yisrael and the Mitzrayim. Okay. Can I squeeze in 2 more thoughts and then we'll leave? Is that all right? Okay. Oh, I knew there was a story I'd forgotten. I knew there was. One story I've forgotten, a really good story. And actually a nice activity point for Dayenu. Dayenu is when we say thank you to Hashem for all that He does for us. So for younger children, this is very nice. Because the best way to say thank you, when I'm going to use myself as an example, so I don't label anybody else. When my wife and I go to a simcha, and we come out and say thank you, so I'll say thank you, it was a lovely simcha, I really enjoyed it. My wife will say the flowers were magnificent, the hors d'oeuvre was so beautifully chosen, I thought that the band chose in detail, right? In detail. It used to be an occasion I had to go to a simcha by myself, my wife would say to me, what did the flowers look like? And I would go, I'm not sure if they have flowers to be honest. Nowadays it's easier because I just take my phone and video the whole hall. So here you are, you can look for yourself. But real thank you is being specific in the details. That's what real thank you is. For younger children, it's a beautiful activity to get them to write a Dayenu card. Let's say if there's grandparents around the table, a Dayenu card where they say thank you to their grandparents for everything their grandparents do for them, and choose 5 specific things. 5 specific things. And it's given to the grandparents either during the meal or during Dayenu. But there's a great story which I came across last year in the Palace Gates Haggadah. By the way, Palace Gates Haggadah is a great Haggadah for stories. And that is as follows: Palace Gates Haggadah. There was an artist who was very skilled, and he created a horse to sit in the middle of the village. But the horse was so utterly lifelike that no one took any notice of the horse at all. And they walked past it. So he consulted a friend, and his friend said to him, you know what you need to do? Cut the horse in half and have the 2 halves disjointed. And everybody will notice how skillful you are. That's what Hashem did with Yitzhak Mitzrayim Kriyas Yamsuf. So often we take life's brachos for granted. We walk past the blossoms, we walk past beautiful things, and we take no notice. And it takes the extraordinary to refocus our minds on the bracha of the ordinary. And again, it's a nice discussion point. You can have a discussion point. What ordinary thing ought we to take notice of? Let me finish with a final thought, which is a little bit more in depth, and that is, and maybe well known, how many steps are there in the Seder? There's 15 steps. 15 steps if you count Motzi Matzah. Yeah. Which way around is it? Motzi Matzah is 2 separate ones. Yeah, 15 steps. So I would ask around the table, and I've sometimes started Seder like this, can anybody tell me the significance of the number 15? So there's several answers. We're on the 15th of Nisan. Yud and Hey, Hashem's name. Right, Sukkot. The moon is at zenith, the 15th of the month. So 15 represents ascent, climbing to ascent. That's what 15 represents. So through Seder night, says the Maharal, we are climbing up to the peak. Through Seder night to the 15 points. And when you get to Dayenu, by the way, you can ask people to count them, and you'll see there are 14 Dayenus. But there are actually 15 things for which we say thank you for. The Maharal, if you look at it in detail, splits up those 15 into 3 groups. First group of 5 is coming out of Mitzrayim, second group is survival in the Midbar, and the third group is coming into Eretz Yisrael. So 15. And the important point to make is that spiritual growth is most wholesome when it's step by step. It's step by step. The Kotzker Rebbe once said, there's nothing as straight as a slanting ladder. Sometimes people want to go straight up to Shemayim that way. It doesn't work, it's going to collapse. When the ladder is slanting, it has stability. So we're supposed to use Seder night to use it to ascend step by step in our relationship with Hashem. I'm going to stop there. I hope you lose some ideas, and I hope that Mit Hashem we all emerge from Seder for ourselves and for our children, reinforced in our own life.
Thank you. Just to leave me to thank my Herman, outstanding as ever, fantastic material, food for thought. Do you want to take any questions? Are there any questions?
Are there any notes downloaded of your talk?
I'm afraid I could give you some notes on some of the discussion points. I haven't got a comprehensive set of notes in order.
But hopefully a video will be sent if you want to, if there's something broader. Okay, thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.